One also interesting thing that came up that that hasn't really been on my radar, but is very interesting because it ties a few different stories together. This itself isn't like super exciting, but all of these different things we've been talking about, this is what brings it together. So I saw these posts, they're not getting like a huge amount of engagement. They only have 152 followers. They're just getting started, but it's this Cask capital project, and they allow people to invest in whiskey, right? And I was kind of like, okay, like what's this about? Whiskey investing. And an interesting thing about investing in stuff like whiskey is it offers a unique benefit related to tax handling, particularly in some jurisdictions. So where whiskey is held in bond, stored in a warehouse under customs control, it's not subject to certain taxes while it matures. So this can make whiskey like a really interesting investment, deferring tax liabilities. And there has been good returns on these types of investments over time. It's these different classes of investments that are in a little more of a gray area, right? You look at art, wine, collectibles, these different types of things. These are very kind of analogous to traditional NFTs as we see them, like Bored Ape Yacht Club and different things like that. It's these, you kind of go like, what's the utility, right? It's a barrel of whiskey that costs, maybe like 30 grand or something. Like, what's that actually about? And you kind of like, it's worth as much as someone's willing to pay for it. Like whether it's the Greater's Fool theory or whatever, it's like, that's a lot of the markets. This is whiskey. Maybe of course whiskey has a utility. But when we look at this, it's like, okay, so my interest is piqued because they're building on Hedera, real world assets, whiskey. Okay. So the synapses are starting to fire off here. And so I look at the website. They're talking about the type of asset this is, the type of yield it has, the product. They have a tokenized marketplace, and I'm reading and I go, oh, I see some people I realize. I see TOKO. I see DLA Piper. Okay, interesting. They're doing something. Very cool. They're doing some stuff. And then I see another breadcrumb in their tweet, Meterium. Right. And I'm like, oh, there's Meterium. And so Meterium is something we talked about on the show a couple episodes ago, where we mentioned that Scott Thiel from DLA Piper had left TOKO. He was still sitting on the Hedera governing board, but he had left. Right. So what was he doing? So he started up Meterium, which is physical and digital tokenized collectibles and investments that is, I guess, under the umbrella of TOKO and DLA Piper and stuff. So this is it feels like an evolution, right? Like I thought initially like something broke apart or Scott Thiel was pulling back or what have you. By the way, one of my big regrets was I was at ETH Denver and Scott Thiel was actually at the Hedera booth. I had an opportunity to speak with him, but like there was a bunch of people coming up to the booth. I was stuck in conversation. So it would have been cool to actually speak with Scott Thiel and be like, what are you working on? But the reality is what it turned out is actually just progression. And it makes sense. If you have an initiative at a company like DLA Piper that needs to get more focused and have its own entity, you create TOKO. And when you have an initiative inside of TOKO that's doing really well, you need to give it its own branding and focus. So you have Meterium. So Scott Thiel's at Meterium, and obviously they're working on Cask Capital. And this is a very interesting one to watch. I mean, you don't have to be interested in whiskey. You don't have to be interested in this type of investing to be interested in what's happening here. This is the convergence of Meterium, DLA Piper, TOKO, Hedera. This is it. This is the first foray into it. And the glue that's, I think, kind of holding it together a little bit is the Hashgraph Association. That's the big news, is the Hashgraph Association coming in, providing some extra juice to get things started. And, this is real world assets, right? When we talk about real world assets, we've been talking about tokenized money market funds. We've been talking about real estate. We've been talking about tokenizing securities and all that kind of stuff. But also barrels of whiskey stored, in customs control or whatever. And it's very captivating. It's very interesting. It's a real world asset. So I'm expecting more of this stuff. It's very interesting.